welcome to part 4 of our 6-part series that we're doing with Diversus Health and David Commercial. We're so glad that you're here today on this warm Wednesday. We had some nice cooler weather a little bit earlier. My name is Mackenzie Tamayo, and I'm the COVID-19 program manager with the SBDC. I'm so glad you could join us today for today's presentation. If you'd like to receive any of the other parts, you're more than welcome to reach out to the Pike Small Business Development Center. We have a whole page on our website dedicated to the other parts as well, so you can check those out there. Very quickly, before I introduce our facilitators, I'd like to introduce you to an organization, Pikes Peak Small Business Development Center. Our center, along with 1,000 other SBDCs nationwide, offers free consulting, practical training, and business resources to our small businesses with help from the Small Business Administration. Our local corporate sponsors include El Paso County, Ent Business Banking, City of Colorado Springs, Park State Bank and Trust, Vectra Bank, Colorado Springs Utilities, and the Small Business Administration. Exciting news is the Pikes Peak SBDC is a Region 8 SBA Innovation and Excellence winner for 2020, placing our office in the top 10 in the nation. After this webinar, if you are interested in meeting one-on-one with the SBDC consultants or attending additional workshops or webinars geared towards small businesses, please visit our website at pikespeaksbdc.org to get started. Today's webinar will be recorded, and anyone who is on the Zoom currently will receive an email following the presentation with the link for the video recording and slides, allowing you to go back and view as often as you like. And before we get started to meet our facilitators, I'd like to also give a big warm welcome to David Commercial, who is sponsoring this event. And so you can head to David Commercial to get more information in regards to any of your commercial selling needs. So today I'm really excited to introduce our facilitators. We have Roberta Renfro. She's a licensed professional counselor and lead for the Colorado Spirit COVID response team at Diversus Health. Roberta is passionate about whole person, patient-centered healthcare and believes an integrated healthcare team provides the most comprehensive care. She has spent 10 years providing behavioral healthcare in primary and specialty settings and managing a team of behavioral health consultants. And prior to her work at Diversus Health, she provided trauma therapy and created group programs for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. We also have Lynn Shull today as well, and she is the newest member of Colorado Spirit team at Diversus Health. She comes to Diversus Health after working with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or as we all know, NAMI, in Colorado Springs for over 12 years, probably felt like 20. Working in the mental health field has enabled Lynn to work with lots of different populations, organizations, and families and individuals navigating mental health resources and support. Lynn and her husband run their own small business and are developing their resiliency as they build their business. Lynn believes that it takes a village to support each other, just like we do at the SBDC, especially when it comes to our mental health. She hopes that having these conversations will continue to strengthen our community. So thank you so much, Lynn and Roberta, for being here today to discuss part 4 of 6 parts. We could probably make a 50-part series on mental health, so I'm grateful to the both of you for condensing it into 6. So I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, beautiful. So thanks for the great introduction there, Mackenzie. We appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about anxiety and stress management in the workplace post-pandemic. And so we can go ahead and go to the other slide. Next slide. And so we're going to start off by what our hope is today is that Roberta and I can offer a lot of suggestions on helping manage our stress and anxiety. But before we start, we wanted to kind of define what stress is, right? So stress is a feeling of emotional tension, and it can come from any event or thought that makes you frustrated, angry, or nervous. So stress is your body's reaction to a challenge or a demand. So we all have stress at different levels, but in short bursts, stress can actually be positive, right? Such as, let's say you have a deadline coming up and you feel stressed about it. Sometimes that stress is a motivator and motivates you to get the deadline met. Sometimes it helps us to avoid danger also, right? If you're walking through a park and you see a bear, you're going to feel stressed, but that stress is going to put you into action, whether you freeze, fight, or flee, right? So sometimes stress can be a good thing. Okay, next slide. So we are going to kind of describe the difference between stress and anxiety. So stress is usually external, which means it comes from pressure or of some sort. So the greater the pressure that we feel, the higher our stress will sometimes feel. So it's usually coming from some sort of external situation. And then anxiety, on the other hand, tends to be generated internally, and it has to do with the perception of what will be demanded and our resources to be able to cope. So it encompasses our internal calculation of the stress, its potential impact, and importantly, how we're feeling about it. So we might say to ourselves things when we're anxious, like, oh my gosh, what might happen? Can I handle it? Do I have what it takes? What if it isn't going to be okay? Stress tends to be situational and refer to the present and real demand. Our boss expects us to meet a deadline, a child needs picked up from school, or our spouse needs us to run an errand, a client expects us to deliver a project. We feel stress as we do what we need to comply with the every life's demands. So stress is more about doing. Let's see, anxiety has a feel of apprehensive anticipation of future danger or misfortune accompanied by feeling worried, feeling distress, some sort of fear. So the focus of anxiety tends to be anticipated danger or fear. And that's usually generated internally. Okay, next slide there, Mackenzie. So, but one thing that they have in common, stress and anxiety are physiologically indistinguishable. So that means when our stress and our anxiety go on for too long and are getting to a place where it feels uncontrollable, sometimes it can affect our health. And so some of the ways that it affects our health, as you can see on the slide, behaviorally, it might show, we have sleep problems, increased conflicts, change in eating. We might cry more easily. Sometimes we're fidgety. Physical things might look like headaches, nausea, shortness of breath, fatigue, racing heart. Emotional, we might get irritable, angry, mood swings, self-doubt, guilt. We might also feel fear, doom, or hopelessness. And then cognitive, which sometimes we don't realize that sometimes that's caused by stress or anxiety, right? So our poor concentration, loss of objectivity, difficulty making decisions, and difficulty setting priorities. So understanding, what I want you to get from this is that I want you to see that we all experience stress and anxiety, and it affects us all differently. And so it's good for us to understand how we show up with our stress and our anxiety. And so hopefully through today, you'll learn some things that might help you manage it better. So someone who has 5 things due by Friday, that stress level may be great for them, and it might get them motivated, and they might get excited, and I can do this. The other person who has the same 5 things due, that might be so overwhelming that they can't cope, and their anxiety levels may go up. And then they have this fear of, am I going to lose my job? What's going to happen? And those kind of things. So it's really important as we go through this for you to kind of be aware of how you deal with stress, or how stress affects you and your anxiety levels. Are you really struggling with managing your anxiety? And then if you notice that about yourself, taking a moment to kind of grabbing onto one of these tools that we'll teach today, that might be helpful for you to not have your anxiety or stress last too long. So does that make sense, Mackenzie, do you think, or what are you thinking about that?
I think one of the interesting things about stress, anxiety, and depression is how much overlap they all have. And so, and I always think of stress as being kind of the starting place, that if we prolong the stress, they kind of become this chronic depression and anxiety type states. So I think especially kind of in a post-COVID world, a lot of people, if they didn't struggle with anxiety before, they definitely did at some point during the pandemic, or now we're, entering, and not just in a business sense, but also in, physically, people are, nervous that, to get back to big, groups and those types of things. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. Yeah. And the big key here is just to be aware, right, of how do I handle my stress? And if you don't like it, is there things you can do to change it, or your anxiety too, right? Can I take a moment and be aware? And we're going to talk more about that as we go through this. So, okay, next slide.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 experience and anxiety in business. So what Lynn was talking about in terms of anxiety, that's something that, pre-existed before COVID, obviously, and will continue to be something that we all have to have awareness and think about post-COVID. But during COVID, some of the things that have an impact on anxiety, I believe, and what COVID had an impact on is predictability. So in other words, with the predictability of, not being able from a business standpoint to maybe know whether or not you're going to be able to stay in business because so many things are up in the air. There are different mandates going on, and the predictability that you may have once had in knowing what revenue might be given normal circumstances is definitely changed. Connectivity, things have been totally impacted by whether or not we could make the connections that are necessary for businesses to succeed or thrive. And so by having shutdowns, and then by having a hybrid sort of means of opening business, we've had to get creative. We've had to think of ways that we could maybe continue, but maybe at a different level or maybe in a different format. Growth is certainly something businesses have had to think about in terms of whether or not you could grow your business or simply maintain it or even make sure that the doors stayed open. And in some cases that couldn't happen. So now it's a matter of, can I go back and grow from this experience? And, sometimes for some businesses, it has been an opportunity for maybe growth in a different direction or a different format. Safety is something we've all had to we've all been impacted by safety, which obviously amps up the anxiety. It's created a lot of stress and anxiety for people just knowing or feeling safe in some of the interactions or connections or some of the necessities of life in terms of buying groceries and things like that. And I also think autonomy has been affected because I think a lot of people get into business because of the idea of wanting to be autonomous in a sense of, this is what I want to do and I want to try and manage it the way I think is going to be successful, and having a bit of autonomy in how that looks. And I think we've had a lot of mandates and a lot of restrictions and a lot of directives that have sometimes challenged that need for autonomy. So those, I believe, are some of the ways that anxiety has had an impact on business. Okay, next slide, please. So I guess I'm just curious, some of those things are things that I've thought of, but that's certainly not an exhaustive list. And I wondered if any of you feel comfortable sharing how COVID has affected you and your business. Maybe Mackenzie, you have some thoughts because I know you interface with a lot of business owners, and maybe there are some things that I didn't think of or just didn't cover. And if anyone wants to put something in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well.
I think though too, not to be morbid, but there are plenty of people who have lost family members and friends. And I think not only to the effects of COVID, but, with the finality of like depression and suicide and those types of things and people struggling with those. So I think, I say this in every webinar that we do is, behind every business are people, and behind people are, their mental health. And I think for a lot of businesses, they've struggled a lot with, trying to be thoughtful with their employees, with themselves, People taking time off. COVID was already a huge HR nightmare in so many ways because we've never done it before. And so now we're trying to kind of rebuild, and it's an opportunity, to say, do we want to do things differently? Do we want to, maybe have, mindfulness in the mornings with everyone? Do we want to be more thoughtful because we're walking out of a trauma, a collective trauma? So I think what a lot of businesses are feeling is that collective trauma, and the knowing that like so much of their personal life is really bleeding into the business for so many people. So, because that can happen even without COVID, but I think that has just exacerbated it tenfold in the last, year and a half.
Yes, I totally appreciate that perspective. And you're spot on in talking about how it is collective. So it's not only collective within a business and a network of people, but it's a collective sense of grief and loss for the country. And I thank you for mentioning some of those things. And toward the end of this, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of the things that our Colorado Spirit team can provide and what other resources might be available to help support you in your business as you want to encourage your staff and support them in some of those losses and some of the things that they might be dealing with. It is something, like you said, it's an opportunity. I think it was nice. And I loved hearing you say that in that kind of a positive frame, an opportunity to maybe do something different. So thank you for that input. So let's go to the next slide, please. So coping with stress and anxiety, we're going to talk about how to hack your hormones to cope with stress. So we all, I think, know about hormones and have certainly heard about some of them. And we'll talk a little more specifically, but basically hormones are chemicals produced by different glands across your body, and they travel through the bloodstream acting as messengers, and they play a heavy part in our mood and how we're feeling. So one of those important functions is to help regulate mood and to promote positive feelings of happiness and pleasure. So we're going to talk a little bit about healthy ways to hack those hormones. Next slide, please. So one of those happiness hormones is dopamine. It's known as a feel-good hormone, and it's an important part of the brain's reward system. So there are things that we do that increase dopamine levels. And when we talk about mental illness, a lot of times the medications that might be recommended as helpful are those that help fill in those dopamine receptors that might not be receiving enough for us to feel good. And sometimes we might look to things that are not as healthy to try and get that dopamine level up. So we're going to talk about the hacking some of the good stuff. Serotonin is another one that many people, I think, might be familiar with. It helps regulate mood, sleep, appetite, digestion, a lot of things that have to do with memory and the brain function and the ability to learn. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone. So if you think about when you have maybe a newborn baby, a lot of times the bonding that goes on when they talk about the mom looking into the baby's eyes and that bonding, or the father, the parent, caregiver, it's that oxytocin level that goes up when you feel that overwhelming bond with your child. And these can be, this hormone can be increased in a lot of other ways as well. Endorphins are the body's natural pain reliever. A lot of times we think of endorphins in terms of, what makes us feel good when we run. We talk about exercise and raising endorphins. Exercise can raise serotonin. It can also increase the endorphins, which is our body's production in response to stress or discomfort. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we are going to talk about dopamine. And so dopamine, again, like Roberta said, is our reward hormone. And so let's talk about some ways we can hack that hormone that can make us feel rewarded, right? So good sleep is on that list, right? Of when we have good night's sleep, we generally feel better. We feel like we rewarded ourselves with a good night's sleep, and we just generally feel good. Eating food, right? Eating food gives us that reward feeling. Practicing self-care, things that we do to care for ourselves. Completing a task. So think about a task that you put off for a month and all of a sudden you got it done. That instantly raises your dopamine level and you feel so good. It's a instant reward. And then celebrating the small wins. Just I'm going to start walking, and I just walked down the block today. It was a start, but that was a small win, and I feel so good that I did that. So dopamine levels can be raised very easily by just doing simple things to kind of reward yourself. Okay, next slide. All right, so one of the ways that you can hack your hormones is cooking and enjoying food. So we do want to preface here that we've all heard about emotional eating too, right? That we eat just when we're sad or we want to, that's part of why we do that, is because when we eat, it does bring up our dopamine, but that's something we don't want to always rely on. But it is a good thing to realize and be aware of that. When we do eat, it can help us raise our dopamine levels. So certain foods can have an impact on your hormone levels. So we put some of those on here just for some little hints or little tricks that might be helpful. So spicy foods can actually trigger an endorphin release. So if you like spicy food, that's a great way to do that. Yogurt, beans, eggs, meats, low fat content, and then almonds. These are foods that are linked to dopamine release as well. So if you are needing a snack in the middle of the day, it might be better to go grab a handful of almonds than grab the candy bar or something, just because that has some really good dopamine releasing properties. And then we have the food high in tryptophan, which we all know that the tryptophan is in our turkey at Thanksgiving. And so it's linked to increasing our serotonin levels. And then foods containing probiotics, such as yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, and these can help also influence your hormone and help you feel better. So curious, Mackenzie, what do you think about some of those foods?
I think they all sound delicious. I have a nutritionist friend, and she talks a lot about, healing kind of our hormones and the ways we do that. And I think, we're always so quick, and I'm very pro medication, and I know it's very helpful for people, but I also think that like starting at a holistic space to just say, let's try this and kind of see where we're at, because food is medicine in so many ways. And, people say that, but it's really true, and we have an attest to that, right? We always feel better when we're eating better. And if we don't, then we know exactly we're sluggish, and it's hard for us to get good sleep and stay focused and energized. So I think already knowing that we have a collective trauma, like knowing that we're all kind of living that, and we're already just right here, it's in our best interest to be feeding our bodies with things that, that always is already helping, we already need help.
And help boost, right? And help boost. So
right.
Yeah, it's really a good thing. Yeah.
And I love spicy food, so that's great news.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about cooking too, right? So especially if you do it with your family, or you have this experience cooking, then you're also, when we talk about the love hormone, the oxytocin, cooking together, right, could be another way to boost that, those hormones, to get a better feel. So yeah, so it's a win-win on that one. Okay, next slide. All right, we're going to talk about serotonin, which is our mood stabilizer. And this one has a lot of possibilities. So like listening to music, right? How many of us have listened to music and it calms us down, or makes us feel better? Mindfulness, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Meditating, here's exercising again, right? Running, cycling, swimming, etc. All of those can kind of stabilize our mood. How about being outside in the sun, right? This vitamin D really helps us in this area too. Walking in nature. And journaling is even a really good way to stabilize our mood, right? So when we write things out, we're not holding it in. And so we're able to get it out and kind of put it on paper and kind of see things clearer. So it kind of helps stabilize our mood as well.
Mhm.
Okay, next slide. Okay.
Okay, we're going to talk a little more about mindfulness. That was one of the items on the previous slide. And just to put a definition on it, mindfulness is really a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment. And it's the ability to calmly acknowledge and accept feelings, thoughts, or sensations, and pay attention to just being in the moment. One of the things about anxiety is it tends to be future oriented, as Lynn mentioned earlier. So if we start getting ahead of ourselves and our mind is thinking about things that are not having to do with the moment, not only do we lose what's really powerful about what's happening in the here and now, but we're cheating ourselves of those pieces while adding to our stress and anxiety. So that's why I feel like mindfulness is so important to really focus on, and not just think of it as a word, but think of it as what the experience is. Mindfulness is knowing, is getting to know yourself, know how you know that you're stressed, become aware of your body. So have a body awareness of stress. I know a lot of people talk about where they hold tension or where they become aware of it. So think about how your body might change. You might have more of a tightness in your neck. Some people feel it in their gut. You may have stomach aches or just a tightness in your stomach, or you may feel like, I just don't feel like eating because I'm so stressed. So think about how your body's reaction to stress is. Notice how your thinking changes. We're going to talk a little bit more about my ways that we think, a common distorted thought processes. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. That's an important piece as well. Become familiar with what triggers stress or anxiety for you. Think about the things that might happen, the people that you might be around, circumstances. Think about what are those triggers for you. And then describe your experience factually. So it's important to, again, and we'll talk a little more about this, but what are the facts rather than what we might ascribe to a situation, either emotionally or mentally. Okay, next slide, please.
I was going to add to Roberta that I read once that loud bodies are loving bodies. And so when your body's telling you something and being loud about something, it's really just trying to heal parts, or just trying to get you to pay attention. So I think mindfulness plays a lot into that too, is saying like, what is my loud body trying to tell me? And like, I need to be thoughtful and mindful to listen. So I really love that.
I love that analogy.
Right, loud bodies. So if you're going to be mindful, there's a nice acronym that helps us just stop and be present in that moment. So the S is for stopping. So it may just be whatever it is you're doing, just stopping in that moment. Just take a break, stop. T for take a breath. Breathing is definitely not something to take lightly. And it's definitely not overrated. So if you haven't practiced breathing, it's an exercise in and of itself. Take a full breath when you're trying to be mindful, and then observe what's going on. So let's say you are in a situation that you know might be stressful for you. You might find yourself noticing in your body some tension, and you just decide, you know what, I'm going to take a moment to just stop in this moment, take a breath, and observe what's going on. What's happening for me? Why am I getting so much stress in my shoulders or my neck? What do I need to do to make an adjustment? And then proceed. So think about that acronym in terms of practicing mindfulness. And in terms of practicing mindfulness, I thought we might do just a brief exercise. If you want to go to the next slide, I'd like to just click on this. Does this have the ability? Is this going to play for you, Mackenzie?
Don't think so.
Okay. I thought maybe somehow we lost in translation.
Oh, here we go. Let's see.
Try that.
It just took a second to load.
Yeah.
Can you hear it okay?
I'm not hearing yet.
I can hear it on my end. Let's see. I wonder if I can just put it in the chat.
Yeah, we can include the link. And
Okay.
what it's basically 54321 is a means to do a quick mindfulness exercise that you can do anywhere. And it's really using the senses. So you might just take a moment to check in with 5 things that you're seeing. So if you're in a room, you might notice 5 different items. If you're outdoors, you might notice the sky, the trees. So it's basically about paying attention and really calling yourself to noticing 5 things that you're seeing, 4 things that you're hearing. It could be the rustling of the leaves, and it could be children playing off in the distance. But by looking at those things and paying attention to those in those 2 or 3 minutes, it's a great grounding exercise. The 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can see. So see, hear,
I think it's touch next.
sense,
Touch.
touch.
Yeah, 3 things you can touch.
2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So it's a nice exercise. If the link is in there, I'm sorry, it's not something we can do in this moment, but that's a good grounding exercise to start with. And it literally just takes a couple of minutes. Once you do something like this, obviously it's something you can do on your own at any time, but experiencing it is something that is so helpful if you've not tried it before. Okay.
All right, so we are to our 3rd hormone to hack here, and this is the oxytocin, and this is that love hormone, which is so fun. And so think about this last year of so some of the hints here are like playing with a pet, holding hands, hugging your family, gratitude, giving a compliment. And think about this last year when we had to social distance, right? And the things that went on during COVID. What do you think happened to our oxytocin levels during this time?
Not great.
Yeah, they probably went down, right? And so part of our depressive feelings we were having or our anxiety could have came because our oxytocin levels were down. And so some of the ways to hack that hormone or to bring those that to help with your mood in that would be doing one of these things, right? So giving a compliment too, right, can go both ways. It's going to make me feel better, but it's also going to make the person I'm giving the compliment to, right, feel better too. So that one is giving both of us an oxytocin boost. So yeah, okay. And then the next slide. So this one we pulled out gratitude to talk a little bit about gratitude. So gratitude, of course, is the quality of being thankful, readiness to show appreciation for and return kindness. So some of the ways that we could practice gratitude, writing a gratitude letter to somebody of why we're grateful for them, or you could even write a gratitude letter to yourself of why you're grateful for, or what you're grateful for. Gratitude visit, setting up a time to visit somebody and just telling them how grateful you are for them. And journaling our gratitude. So journaling is great in so many ways, right? You can write down all of your feelings, all your stresses, everything going on, but you can also journal your gratitude. One of the things we know that science has proved is that you can't have a grateful thought and a negative thought at the same time. So if you're trying to combat some of your negative thoughts that are bombarding your brain, you can actually replace it with a thought of gratitude. So if you start practicing that, and in that moment when it's really stressful, like, yes, this is a stressful moment, but what am I grateful for, right? And we can kind of plug into that. And then gratitude meditation. So you can YouTube or Google meditations, and they have some specific for gratitude, and that's a really good way to practice gratitude. And then a vision board, which I thought was fun. So vision board is putting something together that shows what you're grateful for, right? So you could put a picture of your family, your house, the vacation you went on, cup of coffee, if that's what you're grateful for, whatever you're grateful for, put it on the vision board, and then have it somewhere in your office, on your desk, your refrigerator, somewhere where you would see it every day to remind you, like, oh yeah, I am so grateful. These are the things that I'm grateful for. And so that's kind of a neat way to remember to be grateful. Okay, next slide. And then the endorphins. So these are the painkiller hormones. So these are a lot of fun ones. These are laughter is a big one, watching a comedy, exercise, again, essential oils, getting a massage, dark chocolate, all of those kind of things are good ways for us to kind of combat the pain that we might be going through. And so the next slide, I'm going to talk about laughter, because that's my favorite thing is laughter. You're going to make me giggle already. And so let me read the slide first, and then I'm just going to tell you a little story. But 8 reasons laughter is the best medicine, right? So it's a natural painkiller. It strengthens your heart, wards off disease, tones your abs. Who doesn't want toned abs, right? Boosts your immunity, decreases your blood pressure, but it also banishes stress, and it helps with depression. And so I have been on this journey with laughter my whole life. So when I was in my 20s, I was a giggler. Like, I loved to giggle and I loved to laugh, and I always laughed. But then life happened, right? And somewhere along the line, my laughter got less and less. And there was a point in my life where I was like, oh my gosh, I lost my giggle. Like, I don't even know how to laugh anymore. So I started playing with the idea of laughter yoga. And I started doing some laughter yoga classes and doing some fun things. And they were really helpful. And this last year or two have been more challenging. So the last 4 months, I decided to dive into laughter. And so one of the things in science says that if you can laugh for 2 minutes 3 times a day, it will actually change the chemistry in your head, and you will feel so much better. So the researcher that I am, I put it to the test. And so for 4 months now, I have been laughing 3 times a day for not always 2 minutes, but I try. And I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference, and I feel so much better. But one of the little secrets that I learned is that I have this image in my head that I laugh about, right? So it was something that happened to me when I was younger, and I was with my friends, and we all laughed about it and we giggled, and it was really funny. So when I did my 3 times a day, that image is what I pictured every time that I laughed. So now what I can do is, if I'm in a situation, let's say I'm in a business meeting and I'm just really struggling to I'm getting triggered by what people are saying, or I feel my mood going down, or I just don't feel very good in that moment, I can actually bring that picture up in my head, and instantly my brain just clicks over to feel good, because I have now trained my brain that that image is my feel good thing. And so it's been really awesome experience. And so real quickly, and then I'm gonna let Mackenzie chime in here, but one of the things is that laughter, your body doesn't know if your laughter is real or fake, or if you're just making it up. So laughing, even if it's not an authentic laugh, it can help you. And what I've learned through my experience of trying to deal with my anxiety is laughter is probably one of the easiest ways to hack that feeling. So in that moment where I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling depressed, I can laugh.
I love that. I think when you have kids, that's something really great to incorporate with them too. You know, I think children like laughing and laughing with them and not taking everything so seriously, and like learning to kind of lean into that childlike delight in things. You know, we always say, you know, stop to smell the roses, but I think taking the moment to delight in things and seeing the beauty of things, and just pausing, like you said, taking, you know, a couple, 2-3 times out of your day to laugh. And it might feel weird at first and so kind of uncomfortable, but I feel like with any sort of mindful practice, it's always a little awkward at first. You know, it took me like 6 or 7 times for me to really like get good at yoga, because I just couldn't sit still. You know, so I think just like that, you know, it's okay to feel silly about what you're doing, because you know that ultimately, like, this is a free way to really take care of yourself. So I love that.
Right. Well, and I have a friend that struggles with depression, and for her to distract her depression or to kind of boost her mood, she watches comedies. So she'll find a comedy, or she'll find a funny meme or something to watch. And I don't think she equated it with how it's boosting her endorphins, you know, and so why it feels so good to her is because it's actually boosting her hormones in there, right? Her chemicals in her brain. And so it's just a really fun way to hack your hormones and boost your mood, you know. And so, and if you do it with friends and in a group of people, it's even more bonus, right? Because then we're also increasing our oxytocin, because we have our love hormone going on too. So, you know, it's just such a great way to do that. Yeah.
It is a great one. And I think some of the examples are good because it can cover some of those people who feel a little self-conscious and not feel comfortable to laugh for no reason at all. So if you find your favorite movie, or you find your favorite comedian and you have those go-tos, alleviate that self-consciousness, because you've got a reason to laugh.
Yeah.
Those are great examples. So coping with stress and anxiety. So work on calming the body and the mind first. The two go hand in hand. You know, it's when you're talking about anything really, pain, mood, stress, anxiety, the two go hand in hand. How we think has an impact on our body and vice versa. So the antidote to panic is taking a deep breath. Yoga to let go of anxiety is another good means for being able to relax, or to take some of those stress levels down. And by the way, we didn't really talk about that, but some of those stress hormones, like cortisol, are the things that we're trying to combat. When we talk about good hormones, then we're also talking about cortisol as far as the hormones that amp things up and make us feel stressed. Naming all the colors you see around you. It's kind of like that grounding that I talked about in doing the 5 senses. It's anything that you can do to take your mind away from some of the things that are perpetuating the hamster wheel of thoughts. And then changing scenery. Sometimes just taking a break from where you're at, you know, go outside, take a short walk, go from one room to another. And then progressive muscle relaxation. It's a great way to help your body, because what you're literally doing is tensing muscles to the point where they're very tight and tense, and then holding that tension and releasing the tension. And by doing that through a sequence, starting from top to bottom, toes to top, you're able to, at the end of that, really feel very relaxed and calm, because you have been able to change your body's tension level. Next slide. Now, the part that I want to talk a little bit about has to do with the thoughts. So there's a difference in terms of worrying and problem solving. So I know a lot of times we will feel like we're gaining some kind of control the more we think about a problem, or the more we think about something that is stressing us out. But worrying is actually focusing on all the things that can go wrong. And it makes you feel bad, which then can affect your judgment. And it usually happens during heightened emotions. So we're stressed because we have a deadline or something coming up and we're worried about it. And if we look at it from a standpoint of problem solving, we're able to actually pinpoint and clarify the problem. So that might be the first place to go when we start feeling overly stressed. Pinpoint and clarify the problem, and then identify what the goal is. So the thought processes are directed and not just, like I said, the hamster wheel. A lot of times it's that going around and around and around, and it's not going anywhere, which is what hamsters do when they're on their wheel, right? Brainstorming without judging. So try not to second guess ideas. Brainstorm and don't shut them down, and don't judge them or yourself harshly. Weigh the pros and cons, and work on some of the things that we talked about in terms of calming your body, because it's easier to think clearly when you're calm. It's easier to do some of the problem solving methods when your emotions don't have your body amped up. So mindfulness, deep breathing, those are a couple of easy ones. Next, please. I want to talk a little bit about the cognitive distortions. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. There are common thought patterns, and we all have them. So it isn't just people who struggle with anxiety more than others. It's something that we can all fall prey to. And so some of the common ones that are related to stress are all or nothing or black and white thinking. So sometimes you may have heard this black and white thinking, where primarily we're just basically thinking that everything is an extreme. Like, for example, you may get stuck in traffic and your mind is saying, I always get stuck in traffic, or my boss never listens to me. And this type of thinking can magnify those stressors in your life and make the problems seem bigger than they actually are. Overgeneralizing. That's something where people who are prone to overgeneralizing may start believing that every situation is going to be the same. So if you face a rude sales clerk, you might start believing that all sales clerks are rude, and that shopping's always going to be a stressful experience. So it's overgeneralizing an event, an isolated event, or assuming that they will all be the same. Mental filter. The mental filtering is something that is about someone who might gloss over positive events. So you may just gloss over anything that is positive, and then magnify what's negative. And disqualifying the positive is a little bit similar, but it's different in the sense that you might treat positive things that do happen as if they're an enigma or that's a fluke. And if we think that way, if you think about it, if we just think that things that are positive are just flukes, then we're kind of clinging to a more negative worldview. And then we set a low expectation for what the future might bring. So catastrophizing is where we are inclined to think that things are going to be just magnified. Like if you notice that someone fails to notice a positive interaction, then it can lead to thinking that they're all going to be stressful. It's a distortion that involves placing stronger emphasis on negative events and downplaying positive ones. So if you think about it, mental filter, disqualifying the positive, and catastrophizing are all kind of similar in a little bit different ways in terms of how we're thinking. And personalization. And so for personalization, their stressors, they tend to stress they tend to blame themselves for other things or for which they have no control. So one of the ways, or some of the ways to combat some of those common patterns is to, number one, pay attention. So pay attention and catch yourself. If you think of yourself using these all or nothing words like always or never, I always have, this always happens to me, or this, I never do this, or can have this. Think about those and catch yourself and try to reframe that in the moment. So eventually you'll be able to avoid using that language, challenging those things with what the reality is. Is that true? Do I never, ever get a break? Well, no, that's not really true, because I did, this did happen to me the other day. Take isolated events at face value. So in other words, don't project what happened in this one scenario and say that that's always going to be the case. Take them as isolated events and then allow the other events to be the way they are and manifest the way they are. Don't gloss over positive events. Have you ever met, Mackenzie, have you ever known people when you try to give them a compliment, they dismiss it or, say, oh no. If you mention something that you appreciate about them, they might just dismiss it and say, oh, I have had this outfit forever. It's not that attractive or whatever. Just a dismissal of something positive.
Always. There's always just a demeaning, I think we especially do it as women. So we can really struggle with taking compliments and saying, I did do a good job. And yes, this is a great outfit. And I really love my hair. And that's not, we forget that, confidence is a good thing, that actually helps boost a lot of, our self-esteem.
Right. I think whatever that example might be that fits, don't gloss over something positive and appreciate that positive event. And show gratitude. Don't treat a positive event as if it was just, oh man, that was dumb luck. No, don't do the yeah buts, just say thank you. And avoid imagining and expecting the worst possible scenario. The catastrophizing. So it may not happen that way. So to dwell or to think about it in terms of the worst possible scenario may take you through a lot of physical and mental angst that you don't need to go through. And don't blame yourself for others for the things that you have no control over. So don't personalize things that happen or that fail when it may not be something you had any control over whatsoever. So those are some ideas on how to combat them. So these are all things that are good to know. And some of you who are listening may know a lot of them and implement a lot of them. Some of these things may be new to you. And some of you may be thinking, well, I don't really know how to go about getting better at some of these tools. So no matter what your response is to some of this, I want everyone to know that that's normal and there's extra support for anyone, no matter what part of that journey you're on. The Colorado Spirit team that I mentioned earlier and that Mackenzie mentioned, we're able to come to any of your businesses and talk with you about what kinds of support we can help you provide to employees. It could look something like this webinar that we are doing. It could be a much briefer topic. It could be a one topic that pertains to team building. It could have to do with communication. We are currently working on some things for for an ask that has come for businesses that are now engaging more face-to-face with customers. And how do we work with customers who are expressing a lot of tension? How do we communicate so it de-escalates situations, and how do we not take some of these things personally? So we're talking about those kinds of conversations with some businesses. So we have a lot of things that we can offer, and we can certainly talk to you about what you have as ideas. So our phone number and our contact information for our email is there, and we can certainly talk to you about any of the things that we have listed here on the slide. And by the way, if we feel like there could be some benefit for you to have counseling or some other things, we have the means to be able to connect you to some resources for that as well.
That's great, Roberta. Great information and very helpful as we navigate and support our small businesses coming out of COVID and in the recovery process. And so it looks like this is just great information too, that if people want these slides, they can contact Pike Peak SBDC. We can get you all this information so you can have it. So thank you so much, Roberta and Lynn. That was fantastic information. I feel like I'm going to go take a little mindfulness, take 5 minutes. I found that I put it into my schedule. And so when I do that, I don't push it off. We're so good at pushing off things that we feel like aren't important, which is crazy because it's our minds and our bodies and spirits and all of it. So that's been something that's really helpful for me. Just like Lynn, finding time to laugh, finding time to be still. The work will always be there. You know, everything will always be there. So I just think trying to work to be the best version of ourselves, whether it's, you know, mindfulness and eating differently, is just so important. So thank you again for that reminder for our businesses. And like I mentioned earlier, in case you missed it, we do have the first 3 parts before this as well. So you can contact Pikes Peak SBDC for that information. You can find that at pikespeaksbdc.org. And if you would like to receive free consulting or practical training, you can reach out to SBDC and for us as well. And then next time, we're going to talk a little bit as we wrap up here, kind of reintegration and reengaging, and what that looks like in the workplace and some of the ways we have to navigate in that regard. So again, thank you so much, Roberta and Lynn and Diversus, for giving this great information, and to David Commercial for being the presenting sponsor. So thanks to you both. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Diversus or to the SBDC. Thanks all.
Thank you. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.